On my birthday, my kids made me serve their friends while they mocked my old clothes. She still thinks she's worth something, one sneered. I just kept pouring drinks. The next day, they discovered who'd bought the company they work for. I, 61 female, was invited by my daughters, 33 female and 29 female, to help out at a party on my birthday. They had me serve drinks and food to their successful tech industry friends, some of whom openly mocked my outdated clothes. My daughters joined in. One said, she still thinks she's worth something. I kept quiet, did my part, and left. What they didn't know. The next morning, the company both of them work for was acquired. By me. Just serve the drinks, Mom. Try not to say too much. That was what Rena said to me that night as she adjusted the volume on her Bluetooth speaker and fluffed the couch pillows. She didn't look me in the eye when she said it, either. Mallory, my younger daughter, was in the kitchen taking out wine glasses from a cabinet like a hostess on a cooking show. I looked down at the clothes I was wearing, an old blouse, beige slacks that had seen better years, and a pair of loafers I'd worn since before the pandemic. I wasn't dressed for a party. Certainly not this one. But no one had told me what kind of gathering it would be. They said they needed help, and I came. On my birthday. The guests started arriving not long after. Shiny shoes, smooth voices, long nails, fast cars pulling up on their Hilltop San Mateo driveway. I recognized the kind of crowd right away. These weren't just friends. They were coworkers. Colleagues. Startup types. Venture capital connections. You could tell by how confidently they threw around acronyms and buzzwords over each other, as if they were pitching invisible money. I'd been in those rooms before. Heck, I built those rooms. But to them, I was the mom. Worse, the help. No one asked my name. I wasn't introduced. My daughters didn't even acknowledge me after a while. I stood behind the island counter and poured Cabernet into stemless glasses while guests mingled and laughed. I passed around bruschetta on a tray like some ghost from a forgotten era. She's got the vibe of someone who used to be important, a man said. I remember because his cologne was so strong it stung my nose. Poor thing, another woman added. Still dressing like it's 2002. Then it came from Mallory's direction. She still thinks she's worth something, she said, with that little dry laugh she uses when she thinks she's being clever. I kept pouring drinks. My hands didn't shake. I didn't speak. And I didn't cry. But it stayed with me. Every word. I took the bus home late that night. My car's transmission had gone out 2 weeks earlier and I hadn't bothered to fix it. No one offered me a ride. When I got home, I set the apron down on my kitchen chair like it was any other Tuesday. But this wasn't any Tuesday. It was the day before the announcement. Because what my daughters didn't know, and still didn't know as they slept off their wine and laughter, was that I'd been in negotiations for over 4 months. Quiet, firm, careful talks with a business partner I trusted like a brother and a team of advisors who had followed me since my corporate days. 3 weeks before the party, we finalized a deal to acquire a struggling but promising mid-sized tech firm in Redwood City. Rena and Mallory's employer. I hadn't told them. Why would I? They never asked what I'd been doing for the last decade. To them, I was just the woman who used to be something and now didn't even have a new purse or working car. They had no idea I still held equity in 3 companies, that I was part of an advisory board for a successful fintech startup in Chicago, or that I'd quietly co-founded a new venture during the pandemic that had just raised its second round of funding. But none of that mattered to them. Not really. To them, I was a burden. A relic. Something to be humored when convenient and dismissed when embarrassing. The next morning, just after 10 a.m., the company-wide email went out. Official. Public. Subject, acquisition announcement, new strategic direction. I knew they'd see it. I pictured Rena at her desk, coffee in hand, freezing mid-sip as she scrolled. Mallory would have been in the open space lounge at her shared desk. She probably refreshed her inbox 3 times. I didn't get any messages from them that morning. But at 12:42 p.m., I got a text from an unfamiliar number. "Hi Meredith, I wanted to personally welcome you aboard. Really looking forward to working under your guidance." I smiled. I'd already scheduled my first video appearance for the all-hands meeting the following Monday. At 3:17 p.m., my phone rang. It was Mallory. I let it go to voicemail. Then Rena called. I ignored hers too. Finally, Mallory texted. "Did you know this was going to happen?" I thought about replying with a simple yes. But instead, I turned my phone off and went outside to water the hydrangeas. I slept well that night. I didn't hear from either of them for 3 days after that. Not a text, not a call, not even a passive-aggressive comment on my Facebook profile, which is how Rena usually communicates displeasure when she doesn't want to confront me directly. And Mallory, well, she usually goes quiet when she's trying to figure out who to blame. It was strange, the silence. Peaceful in one way, but heavy in another. I knew they were stewing. Shocked. Confused. Probably embarrassed. Maybe even angry, though I wasn't sure at whom, me, themselves, each other. Maybe all of it. They were too proud to admit they hadn't known anything. That they'd dismissed me so thoroughly, so carelessly, without the slightest thought to what I might still be capable of. And I was too tired to chase them. I've spent years walking that delicate line of motherhood, showing up when they needed me, backing away when they didn't. Absorbing their cold shoulders, their side comments, their distance. Always chalking it up to growing pains or they're just busy. But this was different. This wasn't growing up. This was contempt. The following Monday, the town hall went live. I was in a modest corner office at our newly opened shared space in downtown Palo Alto. A white-walled room with nothing but a small desk, a laptop, and a framed photo of me and my late father taken during my first promotion, when I still wore power suits with shoulder pads. I adjusted my scarf, clicked the Zoom link, and waited for the camera to go live. There were over 400 people on the call. Names rolled in, usernames, acronyms, department labels. I spotted both Rena's and Mallory's names on the list. Neither turned their cameras on. The moderator, a young HR director named Hugo, gave a short introduction. Then he turned it over to me. I took a deep breath and smiled gently. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Meredith Quinn. I'm joining you this quarter as a transitional executive advisor for the integration process. I'll be working with leadership and all department heads to align goals, assess our current models, and to help us stabilize during this shift." I didn't mention my connection to 2 of the employees in the room. I didn't allude to the personal nature of this for me. This wasn't about revenge or drama. It was business. It was my business. I watched the chat box flicker with reactions. "Wait, is that Rena's mom? I think I saw her at the mixer a few months ago. She used to be VP at Stratford Global, didn't she? How the heck did no one know about this?" I continued. I know that transitions like this can be difficult. Change brings uncertainty. But it also brings opportunity. We're not here to gut or to shrink. We're here to grow. When the meeting ended, I stayed in the room for a few seconds longer than I needed to. Just in case. No one turned their camera on. No one said anything. That night, I got an email from Rena. One line. "Why didn't you tell us?" I stared at it for a long time. It was the closest thing to vulnerability she'd shown me in years. But the truth was complicated. I didn't tell them because they never asked. They never saw me anymore. Not as a person, not as a professional. Not as someone who still had a mind, a plan, a purpose. To them, I was just old. Faded. Familiar. Background. And maybe I let them see me that way because I wanted to be needed. Because the only version of mother they still accepted was one who served. And I had served. God knows I had. But now? Now I had something else. Not just a company, but clarity. The changes in the company rolled out slowly, with purpose. I wasn't interested in firing people or rewriting everything. My focus was sustainability, improving systems, redefining roles, investing in the departments that had been neglected. Mallory worked in partnerships. She was capable, smart, but also careless with credit. The kind of person who presents someone else's work if it makes her look good. Rena was on the data team, talented but distracted, rarely taking initiative unless someone else shined a spotlight on her. I had no intention of firing them. That wasn't the point. Let them sweat, yes. Let them reckon with the reality of who I was, not who they thought I'd become. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted awareness. I wanted them to look at me, not as Mom the babysitter or Mom the wine pourer, but as a person who built, who led, who mattered. And maybe, someday, as a woman they could respect. I ran into Mallory 2 weeks later in the office cafeteria. She was standing by the espresso machine, tapping at her phone, fidgeting like she'd rather be anywhere else. When she looked up and saw me, she straightened instantly. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She stared at me. Not with hatred or defiance, but uncertainty. As if she couldn't quite figure out the rules anymore. "You want coffee?" she asked. "Sure." She poured a second cup. Handed it to me. We stood in silence for a while. Then she said, "That was a surprise." "I know." "I didn't think," she trailed off. I didn't push her to finish. I just nodded. "I know." She looked down. "I was kind of awful to you that night." I didn't respond. Sometimes silence says more than anything else. Mallory didn't try to explain herself. She didn't justify the things she said at the party. She didn't apologize either, not directly. But that was Mallory. She'd always had trouble with words when it came to emotion. Instead, she handed me a coffee and stood there. And honestly, that was more than I expected. We didn't talk much that day. But something shifted. I could feel it. She was no longer pretending I didn't exist in public. No longer treating me like a prop in her world. There was a hesitation in her now, like a fog had cleared just enough for her to realize how little she actually knew about me. And for once, I didn't rush in to fill the gap. A week passed. I hadn't heard from Rena since the email. No follow-up, no call. But I wasn't waiting on her. Not anymore. I focused on the company. It had good bones. The previous management had been scattered. There were overlapping responsibilities, bloated budgets in all the wrong places, and underpaid staff in key roles. But I'd seen worse. Much worse. I spent most of my days meeting with department leads, reviewing process maps, digging through neglected documentation. It felt like slipping back into a worn coat that still fit. And every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of my daughters on Slack or in meeting recaps. Once, I heard Rena speak up in a cross-departmental planning call. Her ideas were solid. Her tone was confident. I felt a flicker of pride despite everything. Then she made a joke about boomer tech and I realized she still didn't know I was on the call. I smiled and muted myself. A few nights later, my landline rang. It was nearly 10 p.m., and no one calls my landline unless it's a scam or a hospital. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to. "Mom?" "Rena." Her voice was soft. I couldn't remember the last time she called me Mom without an edge to it. "Yes, sweetheart?" A pause. "Do you have a minute?" I sat down on the edge of the couch, phone pressed to my ear like I used to hold it when she'd call me from college, asking about how long to bake chicken. "I have all the time you need." Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear her breathing. "I didn't know. I mean, I had no idea you were involved with this company. That you were doing all this." "That's all right," I said quietly. "No, it's not. I didn't ask. I didn't care enough to ask." I let that hang between us. I could feel the weight of it, the beginning of accountability. I don't know why I assumed you were just done, she said. Like your life just stopped when you left the house, or when Dad left. I think I treated you like your whole identity was just Mom, and once we didn't need that version of you anymore, I didn't think about who else you might be. That's very honest of you, I said. I was so cruel at the party. I know. I feel like I should explain. You don't have to, I said, gently cutting her off. You were cruel. But now you see it. That's enough for now. I heard her sniffle softly. She was crying. Not loudly, just the quiet kind of crying people do when they realize they've been unkind for a long time and didn't notice. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered. I forgive you. The next week at work, I received a note slipped into my office inbox. It wasn't signed. It read, "Thank you for not firing me. I wouldn't have blamed you." I folded it and put it in my desk drawer. Not for keepsakes, but to remind myself that sometimes, grace matters more than power. Things didn't magically get better between us overnight. Rena and Mallory still carried their pride. They still had walls up, decades of distance and defensiveness. But something had cracked. Just slightly. They started including me in email threads. Not personal ones, professional ones. Asking questions. Looping me into discussions. Mallory even mentioned me in a client pitch, casually, but still. It wasn't love. It wasn't closeness. But it was recognition. And that meant something. Meanwhile, the company began to turn a corner. We closed 2 solid contracts. Our new ops model reduced waste by nearly 18%. Employee satisfaction ticked up. The tension of the acquisition started to fade. I kept my role quiet. Visible, but not flashy. I wasn't interested in making waves. I was there to fix, guide, build. And quietly, to be seen. Then, one afternoon, I got a meeting request from the board chair. It was flagged urgent. Subject line, strategic planning, possible long-term role discussion. I stared at the screen for a few minutes, processing. This hadn't been part of the plan. I was here as an advisor. Short-term. Help steer the ship during the transition. That was all. I hadn't imagined anything longer. But apparently, the board had. I accepted the invite. Meeting scheduled, Thursday, 11 a.m. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, dabbing night cream on my face, and caught a glimpse of something I hadn't seen in a long time. A spark. Not just of power, but of purpose. And maybe, just maybe, of healing, too. Thursday came with one of those cloudless Northern California skies that make everything feel more significant, like the universe is watching. I wore a deep charcoal blazer with an open white collar, something simple but deliberate. Subtle authority. I wasn't dressing to impress. I was dressing like someone who had nothing to prove but still understood what presence meant. The board meeting was held in a glass-walled conference room downtown, top floor of a renovated building that had once been a bank. It was strange being in a space like that again after so many years, stranger still walking in through the front, not as a guest or a vendor, but as someone expected. They were all already seated, 4 board members and a legal rep on Zoom. Mostly men, 1 woman, all wearing varying degrees of smart casual, the way executives do when they want to seem approachable but not too accessible. Meredith, the chair, Nolan, said as I walked in. He stood and offered a handshake. Glad you could join us. Of course, I said, sitting down. You said this was urgent. He smiled, the kind of corporate smile I'd seen 1,000 times, pleasant, neutral, a little unreadable. It is. We've been reviewing the progress these past few months under your guidance, and it's been, frankly, remarkable. The culture is stronger. The numbers are up. And the staff feedback from all levels has been unusually positive. You've stabilized a ship we weren't sure was salvageable. I nodded politely. I've had a good team to work with. He leaned forward. We want to offer you a long-term executive role. Permanent. C-suite level. Whatever title you prefer. We can hammer out the details later. But we want you to stay. For good. There was a long pause. I didn't answer right away. Not out of surprise, I'd seen this coming the moment things started turning around. But because I needed a minute to decide how I actually felt about it. I looked around the room. I saw people who now respected me. Who saw me not as someone's mother or someone's past, but as an asset. A leader. Someone still capable of shaping things. It felt good. And it felt unfinished. Thank you, I said slowly. That's generous. But may I ask, what exactly do you think I'm here to build? Nolan raised an eyebrow. You tell us. That night, I sat in my quiet house, no music, no TV, sipping a glass of Pinot from a bottle Mallory had left behind years ago after a dinner she'd ghosted on. I hadn't made a decision yet. Not because I didn't want the job, but because I finally realized I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I wasn't looking to prove anything. I had nothing to outrun. No ghosts left to quiet. I didn't need the job. But I wanted to know what it would mean to take it. What kind of legacy I could build, not for shareholders, but for the people inside the company. People like I once was. People like my daughters now were. Because despite everything they'd said, and done, and failed to see, I still wanted them to know what strength looked like. Not loud. Not bitter. But steady. And dignified. 2 days later, I met Rena for coffee. She was the one who asked. Her text was short, "Can we talk?" Just us. We met at a little cafe in Menlo Park. The kind that served lavender lattes and had rustic chairs that creaked when you sat in them. She was already there when I arrived, sitting outside with her sunglasses on and her laptop bag slung across the back of the chair. She stood when she saw me. That surprised me. I sat. She waited a beat, then followed. I wanted to talk about everything, she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. But I don't want to make this about me. I let her speak. I've been thinking about how we've treated you. Not just at the party. That was awful, I know. But before that, too. 4 years. I think I've been rewriting who you were in my mind because it made it easier for me not to deal with, well, how much I depended on you growing up. I took a sip of my coffee and waited. I always thought I was doing great. On my own. But the truth is, you helped more than I ever realized. You made life look easy when we were kids. You were working, earning, cooking, showing up for everything, and I guess I thought that was just default. Like it was your job to be perfect. She paused. I didn't let you be a person. And I'm sorry for that. That caught me off guard. I'd imagined every version of this moment, defensive, apologetic, dismissive, but not this one. Not her reaching back into the past to understand who I was before the apron, before the party, before the wine glasses. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. We sat in silence for a bit. The kind that didn't feel forced. Then she said, "Are you going to stay on? At the company?" "Yeah. Everyone's talking about it. The board, the restructuring. People are nervous, but I think they trust you." "I trust you." That last part, she said softly. Not looking at me. "I haven't decided yet," I replied. "It's not about control for me. It's about whether I can build something that matters." "You already have," she said. I smiled. "You're just noticing." I let Rena's words linger. She didn't rush to fill the silence, and neither did I. That was new for us, sitting with things. Not correcting or explaining or sidestepping. Just sitting. The server came by, refilled our coffees, and Rena reached for hers with both hands, like she used to when she was little, warming them on a mug in the mornings before school. She looked tired. Not in a disheveled way, Rena always kept herself polished. But there was something in her eyes that I recognized. The weariness of keeping up. Of realizing how little the people around you truly understand you. Maybe for the first time, she saw that in me too. "I think you should take it," she finally said. "The job. The title. Whatever they're offering." "Why?" "Because you deserve to sit at the head of the table again." I tilted my head. "You think I ever left the table?" She laughed, just a little. Then shook her head. "No. I guess not. I took the job. Not because I needed the title, but because I wanted to change something. The company had potential, but it also had rot, pockets of ego, insecurity, people who were in over their heads but too afraid to admit it. I knew that world. I knew how to fix it. And this time I wasn't doing it for shareholders. I was doing it because I wanted to leave something better than I found it. But before I signed the contract, I requested one condition, that I be allowed to restructure the executive team. Nolan hesitated. "You'll ruffle feathers. Then they need ruffling." He agreed. Over the next 3 months, I initiated a leadership review. Performance evaluations. Anonymous employee feedback. I wasn't targeting anyone. I was spotlighting dysfunction, and not just with a flashlight. With floodlights. Rena and Mallory weren't spared. They were employees like anyone else. Mallory, who had coasted on charisma and connections, was reassigned to a role where she couldn't rely on charm, internal systems integration. No external clients. Just her, the data, and a project plan. She hated it at first. But after the first month, she started coming in earlier. Staying later. She even asked one of the older team leads for help understanding back-end coordination, something she once called grunt work. She was learning. For real, this time. Rena was a different case. She was smart, sharp, but prone to cutting corners to make herself look better. Her team respected her, but didn't trust her. When the reviews came in, I scheduled a meeting. When she walked into my office, she looked nervous. She knew this wasn't favoritism. Not anymore. "I read your reviews," I said, handing her a printout. "Do you know what the most consistent feedback was?" She looked down. "Brilliant, but unreachable. Gets results, but at the cost of collaboration. Rarely credits others." She didn't argue. I leaned forward. "I'm not going to fire you, Rena. But I'm going to give you a choice." Her eyes met mine, warily. "You can stay where you are and keep hitting numbers until you burn out, or you can shift into a new role. One that focuses on team development. Training. You'll take a pay cut. And you won't be in the spotlight. But you'll learn how to lead, not just win." It was the first time I'd seen her truly speechless. "I'll give you 48 hours, I said. She left without a word. The next morning, she accepted the new role. Word spread fast. Not about the restructuring, but about the fairness of it. People expected me to come in with an axe or play favorites. I didn't either. I cleaned house with dignity. Quietly. Steadily. By the 4th month, productivity had increased by 22%. Voluntary attrition dropped to almost 0. Even HR started receiving thank you emails. The office air shifted, from fear to focus. And one day, walking through the open floor plan, I heard someone say, "I hope she never retires." I didn't stop walking, but I smiled. On my next birthday, exactly 1 year after the party, I hosted a dinner at my house. Not for dozens of people. Just 6. 2 of my old colleagues from the early days, my business partner from Octave Blue, and, yes, Rena and Mallory. They showed up early. Mallory brought wine. Rena brought a cake. From scratch, she said, placing it carefully on the counter. I even sifted the flour. Like you used to. I didn't cry. But my throat tightened. During dinner, Rena reached for a napkin and casually said to Mallory, "Remember last year? God. We were such little tyrants." Mallory nodded, embarrassed. "I still can't believe you called her adorable." They both laughed awkwardly. "I was a complete ass," Rena said. "You both were," I replied, sipping my wine. They laughed harder. Later, when everyone else had left, the three of us sat outside on the porch. The air was cool, the kind that makes you hold your glass closer to your chest. Mallory glanced at me. "So what made you not, kick us out of the company?" I took a slow breath. "Because teaching you what power isn't would have been a waste of mine." They were quiet. Reflective. "Real power isn't revenge," I added. "It's restraint. It's grace. It's knowing exactly what you're capable of, and choosing not to destroy, even when you could." They both nodded, slowly. I stood, stretched, and looked out toward the hills, where the lights from San Mateo shimmered just faintly in the distance. "You still wear those khakis?" Rena asked, half teasing. I looked down at my legs. "Sure do. And they still fit." Mallory smiled. "You're terrifying, you know that?" "Good.